Welcome. I hope by the end of this series that you'll love Secretariat and know how extraordinary he was and love him as much as I do, maybe even more. I believe he was miraculous. I do believe he was touched by God in a very, very special way. And I'll give you those reasons throughout this short series, which will include biography of Secretariat, his wins, what made him so great, Secretariat v. Man of War. Going to put some information out to you that I've noticed no one else has picked up on. Because I did some research, when you get on YouTube or you leave something in the comments section and you encounter usually the people who love Man of War are very warlike. For some reason, they're very, very hostile, and I don't know why. And they know they can pounce on the Secretariat people. I've never seen the other way around, but if you've seen it existing, I'm sorry. That's the exception, but not the rule. But anyway, it just gave me some digging and some answers that I said, I'm going to find the answers to these questions. Because if I feel Secretariat is the best, I have to bring sources forward and find the truth. Otherwise, I'm lying to myself. And I couldn't stand behind. I would say something like the year Patch, the one-eyed horse, ran the Belmont. I believe Irish War Cry was number one. Well, my heart, of course, was with Patch. I didn't think he'd win number one. I had a feeling Irish War Cry would have. And that year, I remember leaving the room where my father was sitting watching. So I always watches the hours beforehand and everything, what the hosts say, what might happen. He gets very excited over the whole thing because his family worked in horse racing at the tracks. And I remember going to leave the room. I turned around and I said 1, 2, and 3. And that was with me not reading up on the horses, listening to anyone else's opinion about the horses. It was just totally gut, totally a hunch. It was right. But that's where my heart was with Patch. I knew he probably wasn't the best. It was Secretariat. My heart is with him. And I wouldn't say he was the best if he wasn't the best, just because my heart is with him. There are reasons why. I believe he is absolutely the best and miraculous. I truly believe God was with him. And by the end, of course, we will have a show, or I will have a show for you about his death, which, as sad as it was, there was 4 days apart, a couple of miraculous things that happened that nobody picked up on but me. Maybe because of my own personal connections to 2 saints in particular that have always been close to me. And I found out at the end they were close to Secretariat too. Anyway, here's my introduction. I'm going to start with an article going only back to 2015 to start with, believe it or not, but there was something in this article that touched me deeply. And I think we'll start off this show pretty good. It's the Belmont. American Pharaoh is about to win the Triple Crown. First winner in 37 years. And there were some differences. Not only in the time, not just talking about the time, but there's some differences between American Pharaoh and Secretariat. Things that were done in the present day that weren't done back in the Secretariat's time. A lot of things were different, and that should come into play in the history of horse racing. Things that have changed that we might never, somebody may break a record. Let's just give you a hint. Somebody may break a record today, and they might not actually have broken the record. Hint, they timed things differently back then. So I think that's a sad thing, should that happen. Anyway, I know I'm so excited to tell you everything that I've learned. And I'll tell you why I've learned everything. And it definitely is because of my father and his great interest in horse racing. And like I said, those comments or those nasty replies that I had to prove wrong. Anyway, okay, here we are. Latest Triple Crown history is about the horse, not the humans. And you will know the moment that made me stop and cry. Horses, by the way, horses do make me cry. There's something about horses that's psychic. They're very intuitive and they're very intelligent. And I will tell you later on in this series at some point that that's absolutely true. I had a connection with a horse that was absolutely, you could call psychic. Not crazy psychic. You'll like this story. It's lovely. Elmont, New York. That's where the Belmont is held. It's held in Elmont. There was parading about the winner's circle, the world's greatest athlete, his muscles and veins bulging as if he was hooked up to some overheated generator about to explode. American Pharaoh was sweating profusely under the fading sun, huffing and puffing and flaring his nostrils for dramatic effect. After conquering a 1.5-mile test of character and will that had broken so many lesser horses before him. The bay colt turned his head just so to shoot a bloodshot glance from his left eye at the unruly admirers fighting to take pictures. I almost was close enough to reach out and touch him. Not that I ever dared. In the presence of greatness, I couldn't help but think this horse deserved to be written up in Steinbeck's laptop or Hemingway's, and certainly not mine. American Pharaoh started his Saturday at an old barn with dreary green-colored siding, hard by the Hempstead Turnpike and right across the street from Wendy's. He took his presence bathing behind a barn, with some oblivious motorists whizzing on by, honking at each other, accidentally stepped into the white bucket carrying the soapy water, and ultimately made the long walk towards the paddock and the monument to Secretariat. The ghost, all Triple Crown hopefuls, chase. I guess I couldn't get through that without crying. As I read that, there's several things that I just love to tell you, things that have changed between Secretariat's Belmont, which, by the way, I'm recording this June 9th. Unfortunately, this is the first chance I got, and it's almost June. It's almost June 10th, the day of the Belmont. There's different things between when the Belmont is run and American Pharaoh after the Belmont. They describe him here. And Secretariat after the Belmont. Two very different reactions after that race. And people around Secretariat noticed it. And they noticed, even though there is a drug called Lasix, they started using in the 70s, wasn't widely used. It was widely used in the 80s. And since then, our crop of horses, every crop of horses, it doesn't seem to be as strong as the previous one. There was an idea that it could very well possibly be the Lasix. Why? It took so long to get a Triple Crown winner, even though American Pharoah was on Lasix. Lasix, the reason why they give it, they claim it's because some horses bleed in the lungs. And very, very few horses do. It's a very small amount. And the answer truly is, don't run them. Because Lasix removes vital minerals and nutrients from a horse. And the horses can pee about 20 pounds before a race, and they don't drink before the race because they're peeing profusely. And the idea is, they say it's so the horses breathe better. It's considered a performance enhancer. And it what it does is it drops a huge amount of weight before the race. And so horses have been running faster. And that's one of the reasons why horses have been running faster today. We have more speed horses than stamina horses. And that's, for one reason, it's how they're breeding them. They're not breeding stamina horses because it's just a long distance horse. And we're going into the history of horse racing now. Horses used to run 2.5, 3 miles. Races just, and it wasn't about speed. It's about who got through the race and won the race. But in the olden days, it was the long distance horses that they thought were really good horses. And the horses could run up to 100 races in their career. We don't see much of that anymore because they send them off to stud if they're good. And they basically run them for speed, sprint horses, because there aren't that many long tracks in the country today. I think Belmont is might be the only one left. Anyway, so we're not seeing the stamina that's being cut out, but still, even so, Secretariat's time in Belmont, even with horses that were bred to run distances, even though in Secretariat's time there was only 4 tracks in the country left at 1.5 miles, but they were still running 1 5/8 miles. So they were starting to cut that down. But even before that, the time of Secretariat's race, even when horses were bred to run long distance, because we had more long distance races, nobody got close to his time. Nobody. And it would be a strange thing if somebody does, actually. Think, how would that happen? The horses bred today are bred, they stopped breeding new genes into the horses in the late 1800s. And there was about 4 horses. Let's see if I'm going to bring up a picture of those horses. So you take a look at them. As far as the mothers go, the mares came from several different countries at the time before they closed the gene pool. Basically, they stopped breeding outside horses in. But as far as every thoroughbred horse, there's only 3 male lines. And let me show you. Let me get this up here. I'll show you those 3 horses. Share screen. I think this is it. Sure. Here we are. Yes, here we go. Here we are. These are the 3 horses that all thoroughbred horses are related to. They bred out of the Darley Arabian. Most horses today have the Darley Arabian in them, and Secretariat certainly did. They were great stamina horses, the Arabians. There's 2 Arabians there and a Turkish horse. So thank you for that. Let's stop sharing. And here we go. Okay. As you heard in that description, American Pharaoh was breathing very hard, and he was sweating. His nostrils were flared, and that isn't unusual for a horse to be lathered after a race or breathing hard, and not necessarily would that be due to Lasix. Usually if a horse put that much effort in, and he certainly did, but it was noted 50 years ago today that Secretariat wasn't even lathered after the race. They say he was only lightly broken out where the saddle touched him. And another thing, today, see, what they did was they tweaked some things to actually make it easier on the horse, though I don't think the Lasix helped, but that probably helps shorten their careers. But you get a faster horse, I guess. But I think it took something away from stamina, but at the same time, they're not breeding for stamina. The Secretariat ran June 9th, first week. Back then, people probably don't remember, but the heat that day was clocking it in the mid-90s. It was really hot. And they ran at about 5 o'clock, about 5 minutes of 5, which was hotter. That was earlier, so that was much hotter. And that particular day, like the storm coming in, it's almost like a very dramatic novel. That day, reading a little more about what was going on or listening to the headlines, there's a lot of little things that happened that day, or big things, that a lot of people didn't pick up on. Little tells. There was a thunderstorm coming, about to hit. The thunderstorm was about to hit, and Secretariat was about to break the world record for all time. And there were powerful winds blowing down the track. There were powerful winds blowing down the track. So your horses are going this way. And then you've got the powerful winds from the thunderstorm that's coming, and electricity in the air that's hitting the horse. So the horses have to run against this wind that's pushing against them. That's amazing. And of course, the humidity, when you've got heat measuring at those levels in the 90s, and you've got a thunderstorm coming, the humidity is really, really high. That is almost a death knell. You would think that would be a death knell for a horse. And come to find out, Bill Knack describes this beautifully. He says that before the race, earlier in the day, some girl rattled a bucket. She did it twice, and Secretariat got up on his hind legs and was pawing at the sky and was moving like a dressage horse up and down, and his nostrils were flaring and his muscles were rippling, and he described it very humorously. He was like an 18-year-old kid. He was ever see a stallion going into the stud barn ready to breed a mare? Looked like he was ready to, like an 18-year-old kid. Like, oh God, I can imagine that. And so he did that a couple of times, which took a huge amount of energy out of him. And of course, Bill Nack said, oh boy, what are we going to see today? Because that's something that's pretty unusual. I remember a few years ago, before the Kentucky Derby, maybe within 5-6 years ago, they said, I don't remember the horse's name, but they said there was one of the horses before the Kentucky Derby got up on his hind legs like that. And they didn't run him because they were concerned. They were concerned. I mean, it was too much exertion. I mean, that takes a lot of energy. The horse could be too riled up and maybe die of a heart attack. So they were really concerned. And Secretariat, having done that before the Belmont, was pretty amazing. Amazing that, of course, nobody would have put up with him not running that day. The people would have just gone into the paddock and said, that's it, no way, he's running. We know he's going to win, he's going to run. And that day was another amazing thing about that day was, well, it's a kind of a sad thing. In a way, or you wonder something sad in a way, you wonder what could have been. The anticipation was high because of seeing him run the first 2 legs of the Triple Crown. The Kentucky Derby broke the record for the Kentucky Derby, broke the 2-minute record, which has never been broken since. And he ran it in a way, of course, he ran it in a way that foretold to us that there was something anatomically different about this horse. This horse was not built like other horses. And when you put down, oh, horses can't do this or don't do this, people laugh at you in the comments. Well, of course he did it. Well, it wasn't until after his death did we actually find out why he was able to do this. And it wasn't drugs and it wasn't steroids. It wasn't anything like that. It was how he was built, that there was no other horse that was quite built like that. Anyway, but that is in the future. Every quarter, he started out dead last, and this is the way he ran his races. He was mugged in his first start. You know, the horses came in, there's a bunch of juveniles, they're 2-year-olds, they come in, and they basically pushed him down to his knees. And then he got himself up and ran as fast as he could, but because those early races, the allowance races, MSW races are very short. They're like furlongs long, 5 furlongs, 6 furlongs, 6.5 furlongs, 7.5, something like that. This was like a 5 furlong race. Actually, I should tell you exactly what it is. I'll get his, and I should have remembered it. What kind of a Secretariat expert could I possibly be? 5.5. Did I say 5? It's 5.5. Okay. All righty. I was close, but we'll always check that. Okay. Anyway, so he really was expected to win that race. And Lucian kicked the chair across the room and said, damn, he should have won that. Well, they put Lucian, they said, to make more money, which it makes sense. In those days, people did a lot of things like trying to save money or make more money. And it was a stupid thing. An inexperienced jockey on a horse that you thought was going to win every single race, a horse that you believe, that you tell Bill Nack, his biographer, that this horse is going to make you forget about Reaver Ridge, which was his stablemate, who won the Kentucky Derby, lost the Preakness because he wasn't a mutter, and won the Belmont. He said, this horse, this 2-year-old, unraced 2-year-old, is going to make you forget all about all the other horses. And Bill Nack said that he looked like a great discus thrower. He had muscles on top of muscles, and his coat looked two sizes too small. And when the suns hit his coat, it just glowed like copper. He was gorgeous, and God doesn't put everything into one horse, which made the owner and Ron Turcotte as jockey wonder how good could this horse possibly be. But up to that point, when he ran that race, Turcotte knew Lucien Lauren Turcotte's is jockey that went on him in his second race. He won his second start. They tried to make more money, and you lost your first race. And I guess they say that the jockey had him in trouble the whole way, and everybody knew it. Pretty sad, but in those days, they didn't just pull horses. If you lost a race, there was a race the next week or the week after. They didn't run them once a month, once every 2 months, once every 3 months. Now they're not even running them a lot, and they're not getting the training or the workouts that the older horses did, because they don't want them to lose a race. They're very quick to pull a horse and say, oh, he's not good enough if he starts to lose. But thank God they ran him again. And it wasn't, I guess his third start was hopeful. Let's see if I can find the hopeful one. That's it. Here's the hopeful. Let me share the screen with this one. And we'll see the hopeful, even though there's no sound, but it's really neat because it's an old recording. Okay. Here we are. Share. Okay, the hopeful. Are you seeing it? Let me make sure it's on. Okay, yes, it's up there. Okay. Here we go. Apparently, Secretariat comes up around the outside instead of getting mugged in his first start. Like he got mugged in his first start, what he did was he holds back and he almost leans against the back of the stall. So he actually, they say, oh, he better start well or else he's not going to win. Secretariat always, from that point on, did not start well on purpose. My computer's funny. And that way he would never get mugged. How is this coming out? It's coming in all different sizes here. I'm not sure if you can see it. Yeah. Okay, there we are. But it's my computer's bopping around. Anyway, so what he does was he comes around the outside and makes apparently the crowd, there was a collective gasp in the crowd watching him take up on the outside, which is like, it's something that you do not see a 2-year-old make. And Secretariat, incidentally, did so well that year. Reaver Ridge, even though his stablemate, Reaver Ridge, won the Kentucky Derby and the Belmont, here's another race I want you to see. Did not get Horse of the Year. Secretariat was the first horse as a 2-year-old to get Horse of the Year because of these kinds of moves. And he made them so young and so early in his career. It's like he was mature beyond his years, it's been said of him. My computer's a little slow today, probably because it's recording. And okay. Oh, damn it. Oh, there we go.
Straight away, Secretariat going to the front on the outside. Stops the music, drops back into second place. What a Breeze is third. Angelite is fourth. They come through the stretch with an eighth of a mile to run, and it's Secretariat now in front by 3 lengths. Stop the music is second. What a Breeze third. A 16th of a mile to run. Secretariat draws out to lead by 6 lengths. Stop the music is second. At the finish, it's Secretariat in front by 6 lengths.
Okay, I'm gonna have to try to clip that out. But if you've seen some flub in this, or it's because I wasn't able to remove it. But I'm gonna try to. I can remove it on YouTube, but not on other platforms. And I'm gonna try to upload this to other platforms. But as you can see, Horse of the Year. Horse of the Year is a 2-year-old. He was handridden, which means it wasn't even whipped. He wasn't told to run. He wasn't enticed to run, and he led six lengths in front of his the guys behind him. Sorry, I'm actually starting to get a migraine because this light is in my eye. And I want to tell you about the time. Other interesting thing about that, the time of that race was 1:42.80, and he ran that same distance. That was 1 mile and a 16th. He ran that again it was a fast track, which means it was dry, and the dirt wasn't heavy dirt. It was fast. It was a hot day. It was fast and dry. And that was 1:44.24. Though these are the times back then are measured in fifths. This is Horse Racing Nation I'm looking at. 0.24 must be a mistake. It should be, it's always a fifth is always even. So that there, I don't know. Sometimes you do see mistakes in Horse Racing Nation. Anyway, so he actually ran faster through the water, through inches of water, and you know there's mud underneath there. And back then they didn't, as far as preparing the track, they didn't prepare the track the same way they do today, which they put a lot of sand on there so the water runs off and it doesn't get too muddy. But it's depending how bad it rains. Let's see. I'll come back to you here. Okay. Now, so Lucian Lauren saved money, made more money, but actually he didn't, because Secretariat lost by using an inexperienced bad jockey. So it wasn't Secretariat's fault for losing the race. Had it been a little longer, he probably would have won. He would have made up that because he was running really fast at the end. And in fact, was it Clem Florio said that's my Secretariat, that's my Triple Crown pick. He said, but he lost. They go, did you see how he ran at the end? Do you see how he picked himself up? I'd never seen anything like that before. So people could see that this horse could do something and had that maturity, had an instinct that other horses didn't seem to have that young. Secretariat was also bred at a loss of a coin toss with Ogden Phipps. Ogden Phipps owned Bold Ruler, was the leading sire of that day, except Bold Ruler was pretty much a sprinter. He was not a long distance, was not a stamina horse. And they wanted to breed him to something royal. Something royal had stamina. Prince Quillo, out of Prince Quillo, she had stamina in the bloodline. So if you breed speed and stamina, maybe you'll get a speed and stamina horse, or you'll get the opposite. So it doesn't always happen. As you can see, some of these Triple Crown winning horses don't necessarily produce themselves. They don't reproduce themselves in any great fashion. We've yet to see something really great out of American Pharaoh or out of Justify. Even Poor Arrogant, God rest his soul. California Crow, haven't really seen much out of him either. But though he didn't win the Triple Crown, but I think because he was boxed in. I don't know why Espinosa had him boxed in. He should have taken him to the outside. He would have had a clear run around the outside, but he was boxed in and he actually did get injured. I know the owner complained. A lot of people didn't like him and he was drinking. He was on the sauce and said a lot of things, but he was on the sauce. God forgive him. I think he had a sad life. It seems like he had a lot of sorrow in his life, so we won't judge him for the drinking. I understand. But I would have questioned Espinosa. Why the heck didn't you take him to the outside? You see, Secretariat kind of learned this immediately. And if it was something that other jockeys would have said, okay, let's all just from now on take our horses to the outside, and that way we'll never get boxed in. Secretariat always, like I said, always started badly because he would lean against the back of the stall. Howard Hale Broun, they call him Woody Broun, used to wear these loud jackets at the track. He said he was like leaning against the back of the stall like he was in the Caribbean drinking some kind of coconut, what's that coconut liquor thing? I forget. Pina colada. And yet at the same time, he would come out last and then go from last to first, as if he was really gaining speed as he was going around the other horses. And I think he liked to do that and I think it was really good for his body. He had so many muscles, so many deep muscles, that coming from behind like that, he's waking up being a great stamina horse. Stamina horses, the difference between speed and sprints. Sprinters are good for short distance. Obviously, they can get speed quickly. And stamina horses it takes a longer race, and then they get better as they get to the end. Their muscles start waking up. They start gaining speed and momentum as the race goes on. That's why they think that, because Tappet Trice is a Tappet. There's Tappet Trice and Tappet Shoes out of Tappet. And Tappet's produced 4 Belmont Stakes winners, except one is not a long distance. It was during the pandemic when we didn't really have anybody in the stands. And for some reason, they made the trip. They made the Belmont first and 1 1/8 miles. So you can't really say, that was Tis the Law. You can't really say that he produced 4 Belmont winners or long distance 1.5 mile Belmont winners. He only did 3. One of them was the 1.5 miles. And of course, okay, no, see, there's another thing. Is that, he got Secretariat first horse There's only 2 horses in history that have ever gone Horse of the Year. Horse of the Year, there's 2-year-old, best 2-year-old, best 3-year-old. He got best 2-year-old and Horse of the Year, which means horses are better starting at the age, actually, they're not horses until the age of 5. They're actually colts. And at the age of 5, they start getting better. In fact, 9 years old, they're even better. And at that point, if it's regular, they run regularly, they can run up to 100 races in a career. Though it looks like, all these horses that are really, really pampered, it seems like they're really pampered. They don't run, they run once a month at the most, or 2 months, 3 months. And back at Secretariat's time, I think once he ran a week apart, but usually he ran once every 2 weeks, which means technically, if he ran every 2 weeks in a month's time, he would have run a Triple Crown in 4 weeks. Except you wouldn't have the you might not have the 3 different distances. You might not have a 1.5 miles, but he did do a 1.5 miles again on turf, and that was a little over 2:24. Actually, he almost hit the same, and he did that on turf, which was another thing great about Secretariat, is that either you can be a good turf horse, you can be a good dirt horse, but to interchange, usually they will change a horse. Okay, he's better on turf than dirt. They change from dirt to turf. And a dirt horse runs differently than a turf horse. Dirt horses, it's more long strides. And then a turf horse kind of spreads their speed out during the entire race and then will sprint at the end, which is also what dirt horses do. You stay back, and then horses have one sprint in them. This is a thing of telling you about other horses, horse history here too, that he really ran differently. Horses they try to stay near the front. Sometimes they're late runners. They'll come from the back late, come from behind, or they're mid-packers, or they're towards the front. But in any case, and they usually start to bunch as they come towards the lead, and then from there, they have that one sprint, and they'll break out in one sprint. If they start the sprint too early, they will run out of steam. But at any rate, they sprint and they coast to the finish, which is also something that's very different. Secretariat did not run like that. But that's what they do. Horses have one sprint in them, and then they coast to the finish. That's how it works. So they plod along in turf. It's more of like an up and down. It's different. It's not these long strides. And then they sprint at the end, but it seems like they run slow at first, but what they're doing is they're breaking up their speed instead of having it speed up, slow down, speed up, slow down. It's kind of even. It's like an even pace until they sprint at the end, But Secretariat would run a dirt race, and then 2 weeks later, a turf. And then, hey, we'll try him on turf. So basically, he's completely changed gears from being a dirt horse to suddenly being a turf horse, rather than, it's much easier if you, human or animal, it's much easier, human or horse, if you stay, like if you're a bicycle rider or a speed skater. Eric Heiden, 1980, won 5 gold medals in speed skating. he had huge thighs and he was great at speed skating. That he saw the movie Breaking Away and he loved it. And so he decided he would pick up bicycle riding. And what he would do is he wasn't really very good at it. I hope he's not watching. He didn't really get good at it. And the reason why is because he had huge thighs with all these muscles. And then the power he had would flare the back wheel. So to go from one medium to another, it's better if you do the same thing and you're really good at it. And then you get better and better and better because there's a certain comfort level you build up. That's why when the triathlon in the Olympics, that's because 3 different things that you have to be the best at, win each one. That's what's so amazing about the triathlon. And so Secretariat could do that, which is kind of wild. Which is also something Man of War didn't do. He never ran on turf. Yet the Man of War Stakes, which was a mile and a half, and Secretariat won at, in fact, I'll tell you the time right now. Where are we here? Here we go. 224.80 Man of War Stakes. Yeah, that was also run at the Belmont. So it was in the time of 224. There was a course. Santa Anita had a turf course, and there was a hill. And the horses, there, of course, a lot of horses. 30 died a few years ago. Oh, yeah. 2018, 2019, they found there was a big doping scandal going on. And I think they might have fixed it now, but the turf course had a slope. It went down. And so the speeds at Santa Anita were really, really fast. They had to slow down the whole course. But the speeds they were getting for the turf course were unusually fast for turf. It's because you were going downhill. Everybody's speeding up. So that makes sense. So there's so many things. And the reason why I say, why do you know all this? Well, part of the reason why I know all this is, let me tell you about my history. Well, my father was both my parents came from poverty, real poverty that it's really like, you're not going to really see that in America today. His mother came from Canada, from a little town that was mostly populated by Indigenous Americans. And his father was an abusive alcoholic. And she found him one morning dead in his chair at the age of 52. I'm just thinking to myself, my father said, actually, not long before he died, told me that he beat up his mother badly. And so what she did, she told me, my father said that he was so poor. He said, well, for his birthday, he said, and they were this poor. He said, Ma, I want a cake. My father always wanted pastry. And she said, you want cake? So she picked up a piece of white bread and put it under the water and then threw some sugar on it and said, there you go, there's your cake. It's like, and this isn't it. You think it's a joke. It's not a joke. We're talking poverty. I mean, she left her 3 youngest children and went back to Canada. And she wouldn't put them up for adoption. She put them into foster care. And because she didn't think it was right to have somebody else adopt her kids. And it was a lawyer that wanted to adopt my son, my father, who I took care of like a son, because he broke both his hips in a way, my son. My father feet were coming through his shoes. He was so poor. And so the attorney said, ask your mother if I can adopt you. And she said, no, she just felt it was wrong to have somebody adopt her kids. Yet at the same time, she goes back and she leaves her kids here and puts them into foster care. And so he went through many foster homes where he got beat up badly. And they would put beds in the basements, just to fit as many kids in as possible to get as much money as possible. So his brothers went off and basically they worked at the tracks. That's what his family did because they were really poor. They were short, but they weren't short enough to be jockeys, and that's what they wanted to do. So they became exercise riders, or they did any work that they could. And my father would go help them at the tracks. So there's a lot of little things that he would tell me, and I would ask him questions. There's very few things that we actually had in common to talk about, but I got interested in Seabiscuit. I saw the movie, and he always wanted me to tape. You got to record, and got to be at church, and you got to record the Kentucky Derby. He said all his life that's all he wanted to see. He wanted to go in person to see the Kentucky Derby, and I never had enough money to send him or to take him myself. My sister went to college, and I stayed home. And I took care of my parents. My mother became sickly, so I ended up taking care of both of them. So it worked out for them. But if I had the money, I would have taken him. It's so sad that he never got to see the Kentucky Derby. Anyway, so there were things like football was one of the things we talked about. Tom Brady, and tried to entice him to get back into shape. And bought Tom Brady's book. So look, if you can do, Dad, you used to be Superman, Dad. You used to work all day long. I mean, I've never seen anybody at your age work as hard as you. That's before you fell. I said, if you only were eating enough. He wasn't eating enough. He was eating very badly. I said, in 6 months' time, you're going to fall because you're eating too little protein. And you can't have half a slice of ham in a half a sandwich. That is not enough protein. And said, you were going to fall in 6 months. Exactly 6 months he fell. Then afterwards, a few years later, he broke the second hip. And so trying to entice him, talk about, and I wanted to live so you could see Tom Brady win his 7th Super Bowl. I was like, come on, Dad. It's funny because it was after he died. It was like a month after he died, Tom Brady won his 7th Super Bowl. He just missed it. And anyway, so I ended up learning from him, and then learning by way of learning as much as I could about Secretariat. And I found out things, and I figured out things. I used to do a lot of calculations, figured out things that other people weren't talking about. There's a lot of stuff that you'll see, oh yes, I saw this in the biography about Secretariat, and they've said this many times of that. There was just so much. And I did a lot of calculations between Man of War and Secretariat, and I'm going to do a show on that. And I found about a lot of things about Man of War that nobody is talking about, because people push me to do it by, in the comment section, people who like Man of War seem to be a little more aggressive than Secretariat. They know they can intimidate Secretariat people. And so, I wasn't going to, because my heart was with Secretariat. I wasn't going to lie to myself if Secretariat wasn't the best, Oh, by the way, there you go. It's a plastic little thing, but it's nice. It's painted gold, and he's got a garland of roses. I think it's for kids, but that's okay because it says ages 8 and up. That's me. So, but anyway, so it pushed me to go and figure to disprove everything that they threw at me, trying to say that Secretariat, between the racetracks were faster in Secretariat's time, or Men of War had heavier shoes, or there's all sorts of things that I ended up doing a deep dive, and then I found something that, oh my good Lord, oh my good Lord, there's a huge thing I found, a huge thing that kind of negates actually more than one thing. That show is going to be interesting. I'll tell you that right now. But anyway, I should show you some of the races. But anyway, my father would ask him questions about horse racing, not only to jog his memory, but to get into good conversation with him, something that we could share. Where I saw the movie Seabiscuit, and I didn't think any horse was better than Seabiscuit. And then when I heard about Secretariat, they said, it was after they were talking about, after the Belmont, about Secretariat's win. And they said, he's all alone. I will never forget the announcer saying he's all alone. And I said, no, I don't think he is. How could he be? Because everybody loves. It was a good movie, but it turns out some of the stuff in the movie wasn't true. But that's another story. We're not going to damn Seabiscuit. But I started to learn about Secretariat, and then I couldn't deny it. I couldn't lie to myself. Secretariat was just on another level. He was just as miraculous as Seabiscuit was. How much I love him, because he ate too much and he slept too much. How could you not love him? Slow, and he had knock knees. But Secretariat had, they said he was the perfect horse, and they had special saddles designed to go around his big belly, and he was short coupled, so that means there wasn't much distance between his back legs and the front legs, and a huge long neck. And they said his hindquarters was the thing that really held his power. In fact, I have it written down in some notes exactly to go through those descriptions. And he had superior intelligence. He knew when he lost a race, and he was really pissed at himself. They said he went to the back of the stall, and Eddie Sweat, his exercise rider, you could say he'd be thinking, and then he'd figure out, like, what did I do wrong? Like, he'd be really pissed at himself. What did I do wrong? You could tell he was thinking. And then the next time he went out, he broke the track record. I mean, really intelligent. Bill Knox said that he would stop and watch planes fly overhead. And he said, I've never seen a horse do that before. He had that curiosity. And when there was Eddie Sweat was his groom, and he was sweeping the stalls, if he put the broom down, Secretary would pick up the broom and start sweeping with it. Or he'd take the brush away from Eddie Sweat, when he's washing him, and he'd run around with the brush. So he was playful and he was gentle. It was a gold around children, as powerful and as big, as majestic as he was. And they said he walked like royalty and had the best manners. That he was, horses, you're not quite sure if they are going to be safe around children, but Secretariat he just knew. I mean, he was a highly intelligent horse. Seemed to know and do things in an unusual way that other horses didn't. Anyway, okay, it's an hour and 3 minutes. Okay, even though I'm going to clip some out, let this be show number 1. Show number 2, we'll get into the Kentucky Derby. We'll see the Derby. We'll see the Preakness, and I'll tell you what happened in between. And we'll hear Ron Turcotte, and even Eddie Alcaro talk about Secretariat. I was hoping to throw something about the Belmont out there today, because today it's still June 9th. 4 more minutes, it's still June 9th. But the next show, we'll get into it deeper. And like I said, there's a lot of stuff you don't know, and a lot of stuff that I figured out. Like I said, nobody's talking about times and the differences in racing. Nobody's talking about. I did deep dives in everything, Lasix and everything. Anyway, I'll see you in the next show, and happy anniversary, Secretariat. Want to see him? Want to see him? Isn't that cute? Oh, there. 50th anniversary. Where does it say 8 and up? Can I get that in there? 8 and up. It's perfect for me. Anyway. Well, it's better than collecting dolls, right? Right. Okay. Goodbye, and I'll see you soon. And let's see what happens in the Belmonts. Let's see. Angel of Empire looks good. Well, you never know. You might not win. They said Tabatrice, Hit Show, or favorites. I didn't figure out all the numbers for there. I just figured out the numbers for Angel of Empire. And I didn't get the exact time because you have to pay for it. So I just tried to figure it out with what I could find. And I was able to figure out American Pharaoh's time to almost to the hundredths of the second. One day I'm going to send that to Bob Baffert. He's going to be like freaking out. How did you figure this out? But Angel of Empire, unless there's something, try to finagle that. 228.72, I think I got. But it could be more than that. Well, if they're not running at their best, that's if they're running at their best. And it's a dry track. It's got to be all perfect condition. But that was a new way of figuring things out. But I really need to get the exact time, split times, each quarter, what they actually ran to really get it right. But anyway, my migraine is not going to give you a psychic hit right now. So it's too late. Anyway, see you soon. Okay, this is enjoyable. I hope you enjoy the rest of this. And I'm sure I hope you do come back for the other thing. Man of War. Oh, and then funny Canadian things. Because it's Funny's trainer and Ron Turcotte and other Canadians. Canadians are funny. French Canadians are very, very funny. Anyway, I'll see you soon. God bless you. Thank you for watching.